So, this week has been, certainly I would say, a pretty interesting one in the world of Destiny 2. We of course had the end of the corridors of time, we got our Bastion exotic fusion rifle, and generally people felt one way or another about it. They either loved it with the entire puzzle and all that kind of stuff, or they hated it and wanted a much better reward. And out of that conversation, I think has sparked a bigger sort of moment. You know, a bigger question, and that question is whether or not the Corridors of Time community puzzle event was a success. What did Bungie do right? What did they do wrong? And how do you feel about the reward? Well, those are going to be a few questions that I'm answering in today's video. What's going on, Guardians? My name is The Black Link, and I've definitely got some thoughts about this. Over the course of the week, a lot of people I think, paid proper respect to the Corridors of Time. We got to learn a bit more about what went into creating that. In this week's issue of the Bungie Weekly blog, they talked about how they came up with the puzzle. It was based on some things that they had learned through their Bungie Pentathlons, which they do every year, where they get together and solve a bunch of miniature puzzles, and the solutions from those miniature puzzles come together to create giant puzzles, and that they have been working on this particular puzzle for several years. And right out the bat, I'll say I respect the hell out of them for doing that. This was an incredible community puzzle that no one person would have been able to solve alone. So if their goal was to get people working together to make a mass community event, I think they knocked it out of the park with that. You know, the entire goal here was to create an event that everyone could take part in, and then that everyone could, benefit from at the end with the unlocking of the exotic quest. If you aren't tuned into this, basically what happened was, last week in Destiny, a mysterious quest popped up at one of the game's NPCs. If you picked it up, you could head into basically this endless maze that had a bunch of different doors with a bunch of different symbols. And only by going through those doors in the correct order with the correct symbols could you reach an end to the maze where you'd pick up lore drops, secret emblems, and stuff like that. But every time you got to the last room of the maze, every time you figured out the right pathing combination, there were 19 different combinations, by the way, well, 20 if you're counting the secret emblem and all that, but every time you got to the end of it, you would get a sequence for a new puzzle, and only after getting all of those sequences could you start to figure out the final path, which required that you go through 30 different doors. It was insane. It had everybody in the community working super hard to figure it out, and I think that was really cool. It reminded me a lot of Niobe Labs a year or so ago when Bungie dropped that puzzle and people were just working together to try to figure out the solutions to all of it. Only this time, the hints were actually in the game in the form of the obelisks that are on different planets. But anyways, once people finally figured this out, once they worked together over the course of a full weekend and figured everything out, well, I say weekend, but it was actually a full week. But an exotic quest was unlocked. An exotic quest that we knew about, but we weren't supposed to be getting for another week or two. So essentially, lore-wise, what happened here was we basically went through time and brought that exotic quest from the future to us in the present. We basically unlocked that quest earlier than we were supposed to get it, at least according to the roadmap. I understand that's the lore, that's the idea for this whole thing, and I think that's pretty darn cool. But at the same time, it definitely left a few people, well, a little bit less than satisfied, shall we say, when it comes to the reward for this massive community puzzle. Because of course, a lot of people, we had no idea what we were actually going to be getting at the end of this. All we knew was that it was an exotic quest. You can always tell when a quest is exotic based on the color of the quest frame in your inventory, and this was an exotic quest frame. So people were wondering, what are we going to get from this? Could this be something like 0 Hour or the Whisper of the Worm mission? We're going to be getting a returning exotic from D1. Since it has to do with time, could it possibly be the Vex Mythoclast? I thought there was a lot of interesting conversation about that. But no, at the end of the day, it wound up being Bastion, an exotic that we already knew about because Bungie had already spoiled it on their roadmap. And this, of course, led to another conversation about whether or not Bungie should even continue doing those roadmaps. Personally, I understand. I do. I get the disappointment there. because of course people were expecting this to be something completely different. They were expecting it to be something completely new. And I do think that while I love Bastion, you guys have seen my review video on it, I think it's an okay weapon for PvE, but it's a fantastic gun in PvP. It's super fun to play with. I think it's a great reward. I will admit, you know, I was a little bit bummed out to learn that all we were getting for completing this puzzle was a quest we already knew about a little bit earlier, rather than something completely unknown like when we got the Outbreak Perfected, which is something completely out of left field. Nobody thought that the Outbreak Prime was going to see a revamped version in Destiny 2. And a lot of people, myself included, were wondering if this is going to mean something else. Of course, we've got another hidden exotic in the database, a hidden solar heavy weapon, so people were wondering if that might be the reward from this. Or again, like I said before, if something like Mythoclast or another primary was going to be dropping into the game. And while I'm super happy with the way this ended, I do have to say I understand when people are like, man, it would have been much better if Bungie hadn't spoiled Bastion as a reward, you know, on the roadmap a long time ago. And we had just gotten this quest and boom, completed it as a community, and at the end of it got an exotic that nobody knew anything about. Yeah, so I guess basically I'm saying that knowing the reward ahead of time, knowing what could potentially be dropping from this, does kind of mute the entire effort just a little bit. And while I definitely think overall that the Corridors of Time experiment, community puzzle, community event, whatever you want to call it, was a roaring success, I do believe next time, maybe in the future, Bungie should probably keep the reward that you're going to be getting from this hidden puzzle completely separate. Let it be a complete surprise to the community. Though, with that being said, hopefully people recognize the amazing amount of effort that went into not only creating the Corridors of Time, but to solving the insane puzzle that came along with it. Overall, I think this was a really cool moment in Destiny's history. And it's certainly going to go on to be one of those, oh, you just had to be there sort of moments that we'll be talking about in years to come. But alright, that's it for this one, Guardians. I just wanted to get some of my thoughts about the Corridors of Time event out there. I already talked a lot about Bastion this week. I've got a review video up for that. If you want to check it out, there's a link to it down in the description box below. But those are my thoughts on the reward system for this kind of event and the event itself. What are yours? How did you feel about the Corridors of Time event? Were you satisfied with the way it ended, you know, with the rewards of a secret emblem, some lore, and of course the Bastion exotic quest? Or would you have preferred that the reward be something we had no idea about? Sound off down in the comment section below. That's it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I'm the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.